Marcus Chun stood at attention in the sterile white briefing room aboard the U.S. Harmony, his dress uniform crisp despite the 3-month journey from Earth. The war had ended 6 months ago, but the scars remained visible everywhere he looked. The alien architecture of the station seemed to mock human engineering with its flowing curves and impossible angles that hurt to stare at too long. "At ease, Sergeant," Admiral Rodriguez said, her weathered face bearing the same exhaustion that plagued every human who had survived the 5-year conflict. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels." Marcus relaxed slightly, though his combat instincts remained sharp. 27 years old and already a veteran of 17 major battles against the Hegemony Coalition, he had learned that classified usually meant dangerous. The alien alliance that had nearly wiped humanity from existence had been vast, encompassing dozens of species united in their belief that humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to exist alongside civilized galactic society. They had been wrong about human nature, but right about their danger. "Sir, I'm ready for whatever assignment you have," Marcus replied, studying the Admiral's expression. Behind her, through the massive viewport, he could see the shattered remains of Kepler Station, one of the first major victories in humanity's impossible comeback. Admiral Rodriguez activated a holographic display that showed a young alien girl, perhaps equivalent to a human 12-year-old. Her skin was a pale blue-green, with delicate features and large, intelligent eyes that seemed too old for her apparent age. Strange markings covered her arms like intricate tattoos, pulsing with a faint inner light. "Meet Zerethess of the Vethtai," the Admiral said. "She's the daughter of High Commander Veltar, the hegemony leader who ordered the genocide protocols against our colonies." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He remembered the footage from New Harmony, the charred remains of 500,000 civilians. Children's toys melted into unrecognizable shapes. The screams that had echoed across subspace communication channels before the planet went silent. "With respect, Admiral, why are we keeping his daughter alive?" "Because, Sergeant, she's not just any Vethtai. She's what they call a truth seer. Her species has the ability to perceive emotional and psychological states with perfect clarity. During the war, she was used to interrogate human prisoners." The Admiral paused, her expression darkening. "But, according to our intelligence, she began helping prisoners escape. Her own people branded her a traitor." The hologram shifted to show security footage of the girl, moving through what appeared to be a hegemony prison facility. She was leading a group of human prisoners through maintenance corridors, her small form barely visible in the dim lighting. Marcus watched as she placed her hand against the security panel, the markings on her skin glowing brighter, and the door slid open. "She saved over 300 human lives before her father discovered her activities," Admiral Rodriguez continued. "When the hegemony surrendered, part of our peace agreement included protective custody for war criminals and their families. But there are elements on both sides who want her dead." Marcus studied the footage more carefully. The girl moved with purpose and intelligence far beyond her apparent age. When she looked directly at the camera, those ancient eyes seemed to pierce through the recording to stare directly at him. "What's my mission, Admiral?" "You're going to be her guardian. Transport her to the neutral world of Sanctum Prime, where she'll be placed in protective custody until the war crimes tribunals are complete. It should be a simple escort mission, but we have reason to believe there will be attempts on her life during transport." "Human attempts or alien?" "Both. There are humans who want revenge for what her father did. There are aliens who see her as a traitor to their cause. And there are political elements who believe her testimony could damage the peace process." Admiral Rodriguez deactivated the hologram. "Your job is to keep her alive, regardless of who tries to kill her." Marcus nodded slowly. "When do I meet her?" "Right now." The Admiral led him through several security checkpoints, each one staffed by both human and alien personnel. The integration was awkward, with both species clearly uncomfortable around each other despite the peace treaty. Marcus noticed how the aliens' translator devices struggled with human emotional nuances, while humans seemed equally challenged by alien body language. They stopped at a heavily reinforced door marked with both human and alien security symbols. 2 human Marines stood guard outside, their weapons clearly visible. Admiral Rodriguez placed her hand on a scanner, and the door hissed open. The room beyond was larger than Marcus had expected, designed to accommodate the comfort needs of multiple species. The lighting was adjustable, the temperature controls were elaborate, and the furniture could reshape itself for different physiologies. Despite these accommodations, the space felt like what it was, a very comfortable prison. Zarathes sat on what appeared to be a meditation cushion, her legs folded beneath her in a position that would have been impossible for human anatomy. She was smaller than the hologram had suggested, barely reaching Marcus's chest and height. When she looked up at their entrance, those large eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Zarathes, this is Sergeant Marcus Chen, Admiral Rodriguez said, her voice taking on a gentler tone. He'll be accompanying you to Sanctum Prime. The girl stood gracefully, her movements flowing like water. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that human ears weren't designed to process, creating an almost musical quality to her words. You fear me, she said simply, her translated words carrying perfect clarity despite the complex alien grammar. But you also feel duty, and something else, curiosity. Marcus felt exposed under her gaze. The idea that she could read his emotional state so clearly was deeply unsettling. I'm here to protect you, that's all. Yes, she replied, tilting her head in a gesture that reminded Marcus of a bird studying an interesting object. But you wonder if I deserve protection. You think of the children on New Harmony. The blunt statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward. Zarathes, we've discussed this. Human emotions are complex, and reading them without permission can be considered invasive. I apologize, the girl said, though her eyes never left Marcus's face. I do not mean to intrude, but his surface thoughts are very loud. He lost someone in the war. Marcus felt his hands clench in a fist. My brother was on New Harmony. He was 8 years old. The room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Zarathes looked down at her hands, the markings on her skin pulsing more slowly. I'm sorry for your loss, she said quietly. I tried to convince my father to spare the civilian worlds. He said that mercy was weakness, that humans would never truly surrender while they had hope. He was wrong, Marcus said, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. Yes, he was wrong about many things. She looked up again, and Marcus saw something that transcended species boundaries, the expression of a child who had seen too much. He was wrong about me as well. Admiral Rodriguez cleared her throat. Your transport leaves in 6 hours. I suggest you both get some rest. The journey to Sanctum Prime will take 8 days through several potentially hostile systems. As they prepared to leave, Zarathes spoke again. Sergeant Chun, yes, I know you do not trust me, but I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to help you complete this mission. Your brother's death was not in vain if it leads to lasting peace. Marcus paused at the door. How do you know what my brother's death was for? Because, she said, settling back onto her meditation cushion, he gave you the strength to hate what war does to children. That hatred will help you protect me, even though I am the child of your enemy. Outside the room, Admiral Rodriguez placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. She's not like other Vethtai. Her abilities make her incredibly empathetic, but they also make her wise beyond her years. Try to remember that she's as much a victim of this war as anyone. I'll do my job, Admiral. I know you will. But, Marcus, this mission is more important than you realize. There are political forces on both sides working to restart the war. If she dies in human custody, it could be the excuse they need. Marcus spent the next few hours reviewing mission files and checking his equipment. The journey to Sanctum Prime would take them through 3 different star systems, each controlled by different political factions. The first system was officially neutral, but had strong hegemony sympathies. The second was controlled by humans, but had been infiltrated by various resistance cells. The third contained Sanctum Prime itself, supposedly the most secure neutral territory in known space. His weapon loadout reflected the mission's complexity: a standard pulse rifle for open combat, a compact plasma pistol for close quarters, and several non-lethal options for situations where killing might create diplomatic incidents. His armor was the latest human design, incorporating lessons learned from 5 years of fighting enemies with superior technology. The ship assigned to the mission was the UES Defiant, a mid-sized destroyer that had been retrofitted for diplomatic missions. Captain Sarah Voss was a veteran of the Battle of Alpha Centauri, where humanity had first proven they could not only stand against hegemony forces, but actually defeat them in open combat. Sergeant Chun, Captain Voss greeted him as he boarded. She was a compact woman with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I've read your file. Impressive record. But this mission is different from anything you've faced before." "How so, Captain?" "In combat, you knew who the enemy was. Here, the enemy could be anyone. We're carrying human crew members who lost family to the hegemony. We're using navigation beacons maintained by former hegemony worlds. We're trusting our lives to peace treaty guarantees that half the galaxy thinks are too generous to humanity." Marcus nodded. "What's the crew's attitude toward the passenger?" "Mixed. Some see her as a war criminal's daughter who deserves whatever happens to her. Others remember that she saved human lives. A few think she's some kind of hegemony spy planted to infiltrate our systems." Captain Voss paused. "What do you think?" "I think she's a kid who got caught up in something bigger than she could understand. But I also think she's dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with weapons or combat skills. The truth-seeing ability, that, and the fact that she makes me want to trust her. Anyone who can read emotions that clearly could manipulate them just as easily." Captain Voss smiled grimly. "Good. Healthy paranoia will keep you both alive. But remember, Sergeant, our job is to deliver her safely, not to judge whether she deserves it." The departure from the space station was routine, but Marcus noticed the extra security precautions. The Defiant was escorted by 2 fighter squadrons until they reached the jump point, and their departure vector was classified until the moment they enter hyperspace. Zarathes had been given quarters next to Marcus's, with the connecting door locked, but monitored. The room had been modified to accommodate Vethtai physiology, with lower gravity settings and atmosphere that contained trace gases her species required. Despite these accommodations, Marcus could sense her discomfort through the shared wall. After the ship entered hyperspace, and the immediate departure procedures were complete, Marcus decided to check on his charge. The security feed showed her sitting motionless in the center of her room, apparently in some form of meditation. He activated the intercom. "Zarathes, how are you adjusting to the ship?" "It is difficult," she replied, her voice carrying clearly through the speaker. "So many humans in such a small space. Their emotions are very intense." Marcus realized he hadn't considered how her abilities might affect her in close quarters with a human crew. "Is it painful?" "Not painful exactly, but overwhelming. Like trying to listen to dozens of conversations at once, except the conversations are emotions instead of words." "Can you block it out?" There was a pause before she answered. "Partially, but it requires constant concentration. I am tired." Marcus made a decision that surprised him. "Would it help if I stayed nearby? If you could focus on one person's emotions instead of everyone's?" "You would do that?" "It's part of my job to make sure you're comfortable and safe." Another pause. "Yes, it would help. But are you certain? I would necessarily know everything you are feeling." Marcus considered this. The idea of having his emotional state read continuously was deeply uncomfortable. But he had volunteered for this mission, and the girl was clearly suffering. "I'll manage. Give me a few minutes to set up." He moved his gear to the small anteroom between their quarters and established a watch position where he could monitor both the corridor and Zarathes's room. The change in her posture was immediate. She relaxed visibly, and the pale glow of her markings dimmed to a more natural level. "Thank you," she said through the intercom. "This is much better." "You're welcome. Try to get some rest. We have 7 days to go." As the ship hummed through hyperspace toward their first waypoint, Marcus found himself settling into an unexpected routine. During his watch periods, Zarathes could rest normally. During her meditation times, he could focus on mission planning and equipment maintenance. The arrangement was practical, professional, and mutually beneficial. It was also the beginning of something neither of them had expected: understanding. On the second day, as they approached their first navigation beacon, Zarathes spoke to him directly rather than through the intercom. "Sergeant Shun, may I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Why did you volunteer for this mission?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Because someone needed to do it, and I was qualified." "That is not the complete truth. I can sense that you are conflicted about something deeper." He sighed. "Because I needed to know if I could protect someone I was supposed to hate." "And what have you learned so far?" Marcus looked at the security monitor, where Zarathes sat cross-legged on her sleeping platform, her large eyes fixed on the camera, as if she could see him directly through it. "I've learned that hate is a lot more complicated than I thought. The alarm klaxon shattered the quiet routine Marcus had established aboard the Defiant. He was instantly alert, his combat training overriding 3 days of relative calm. The ship's emergency lighting cast red shadows throughout the corridors as he grabbed his weapon and moved towards Zarathus's quarters. All hands to battle stations. Captain Voss's voice crackled over the intercom. We have multiple contacts approaching at high speed. Unknown configuration. Marcus found Zarathus already awake, standing near her door with an expression of concentrated focus. Her skin markings were pulsing rapidly, cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. "What is it?" he asked, keying in his security code to open her door. "Fear," she said simply. "Great fear from many minds, but also determination." And she paused, tilting her head as if listening to something only she could hear. "Hatred. Very focused hatred." "Hatred for whom?" Before she could answer, the ship shuddered as something impacted their shields. Marcus's combat instincts kicked in completely. "We need to get you to the secure compartment," he said, grabbing the emergency kit he'd prepared for exactly this situation. "No," Zarathus said, her voice carrying a strange authority. "That will not help. They are not trying to destroy the ship." "Then, what do they want?" "Me." The intercom crackled again. "Sergeant Shun, report to the bridge immediately. Bring the package." Marcus hesitated. Standard protocol would be to secure Zarathus in the armored safe room and defend her there. But something in her demeanor suggested she knew more about their situation than anyone else on the ship. "Can you tell who they are?" "Veth Tai," she replied, already moving toward the door. "My father's former loyalists. They believe killing me will somehow restore honor to our species." The journey to the bridge felt like walking through a war zone. Emergency crews ran through the corridors, preparing for battle or boarding actions. Marcus noticed that several crew members stared at Zarathus with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The stress of potential combat was bringing underlying tensions to the surface. On the bridge, Captain Voss was coordinating with her tactical officer while studying multiple displays showing the approaching ships. When Marcus and Zarathus arrived, the entire crew turned to look at them. "Report, Captain," Marcus said. 3 ships, Veth Tai design, but modified with black market human weapons. "They're demanding we surrender you," she said, nodding towards Zarathus. "They claim you're a war criminal who needs to face justice." "I'm not a war criminal," Zarathus said quietly. "But they are correct that I must face justice eventually. However, not their justice." One of the approaching ships hailed them, and the main screen filled with the image of a Veth Tai commander. His features were similar to Zarathus's, but harder, with scars that spoke of recent combat. When he spoke, his words carried the formal cadence of military authority. "Human vessel, you carry the traitor child Zarathus. Surrender her to us, and you may continue on your way." Captain Voss stepped forward. "This is Captain Sarah Voss of the United Earth ship Defiant. We are on a diplomatic mission under the terms of the Sanctum Accords. Any interference with our passage is a violation of interstellar law." The Veth Tai commander's expression didn't change. "Your human laws mean nothing to us. The child betrayed her own species. She caused the deaths of thousands of loyal warriors. She will answer for her crimes." "I will speak with them," Zarathus said, moving toward the communication station. "Absolutely not," Marcus replied, stepping to block her path. "That's exactly what they want." "Sergeant Shun is correct," Captain Voss added. "We don't negotiate with terrorists." But Zarathus was already reaching for the communications panel. As her hand touched the controls, her markings flared with bright light, and suddenly, her voice was being transmitted to the attacking ships. "Commander Yethral," she said, apparently recognizing the alien on screen. "You served under my father during the siege of Kepler Station." The commander's eyes widened slightly. "Zarathus, you remember me. I remember all of my father's officers. I remember how you questioned his orders to execute civilian prisoners. I remember how you tried to convince him that mercy could be a form of strength. That was before I understood the full extent of your betrayal," Commander Yethral replied, but Marcus noticed his voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. "My betrayal was saving innocent lives. Your betrayal was abandoning the principles that made our species worthy of respect in the first place." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding of why Zarathus was so dangerous to various political factions. Her ability to read emotions gave her an almost supernatural understanding of psychology and motivation. "You helped our enemies escape," Commander Yethral said. "Prisoners who returned to fight against us. I helped children and civilians escape execution. Some of those prisoners were soldiers, yes. But there were also fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters. They were people, just as we are people. They are humans. They are violent and unpredictable and dangerous." "Yes," Zarathes agreed, surprising everyone on the bridge. "They're dangerous. But so are we. So is every species capable of interstellar travel. The question is not whether they are dangerous, but whether they are honorable." Marcus realized he was holding his breath. The young alien girl was conducting a debate that could determine whether they lived or died, and she was doing it with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life reading the thoughts and emotions of others. "Honor, Commander Yethral repeated. You speak of honor while surrounded by the enemies of our people. I speak of honor while protected by a human soldier who lost his brother to our forces, yet still treats me with respect and kindness. I speak of honor while traveling on a ship crewed by humans who have every reason to hate me, yet fulfill their duty to keep me safe." She paused, and Marcus could see her concentrating intensely. "Commander, I can sense your emotions even at this distance. You are not here for justice. You are here because you are afraid." "I fear nothing," the commander replied, but his voice carried less conviction than before. "You fear that the war is truly over. You fear that everything you believed about humans was wrong. You fear that the deaths you caused were meaningless." Zarathes stepped closer to the screen. "Most of all, you fear that I am right, and that honor requires acknowledging our mistakes rather than compounding them." The communication channel fell silent for several long moments. Marcus could see the tactical display showing the 3 Vethtai ships holding position, neither advancing nor retreating. Finally, Commander Yethral spoke again. "You have become very wise for one so young. I have become wise because I chose to listen to my conscience rather than my pride. And if I allow you to continue to Sanctum Prime, what then? Then I will testify truthfully about the war crimes committed by both sides. I will help the tribunal understand what happened and why, so that peace can be built on truth rather than convenient lies. Both sides. Yes, my father ordered the execution of civilians. But I also witnessed human forces committing atrocities against Vethtai prisoners. Justice requires acknowledging all crimes, not just those committed by the losing side." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that Zarathes might testify against human war crimes had not been mentioned in his briefing. He caught Captain Voss's eye and saw the same concern reflected there. Commander Yethral was quiet for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have given me much to consider, young truth-seer. We will not interfere with your passage." The communication ended, and the tactical display showed the 3 Vethtai ships turning away from the Defiant. "Well," Captain Voss said after a moment, "that was unexpected. She just talked them out of attacking us," the tactical officer said, obvious admiration in his voice. Marcus looked at Zarathes, who had moved away from the communication station and was now standing quietly near the observation windows. Her markings had returned to their normal pale glow, but she looked exhausted. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Using my abilities at such range and intensity is draining," she replied. "But yes, I am well." "That thing you said about human war crimes," Captain Voss said carefully. "Is that true?" Zarathes turned to face her. "Captain, I am a truth-seer. I cannot lie about what I have witnessed, even when the truth is uncomfortable for those I wish to protect." "What exactly did you see?" "I saw human soldiers executing Vethtai prisoners who had surrendered. I saw orbital bombardments of civilian targets. I saw interrogations that used torture methods that would have been considered barbaric by any civilized species. The bridge crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. These were allegations that, if true, could undermine the entire peace process. But I also saw human soldiers sharing their rations with enemy prisoners. I saw human medics treating wounded Vethtai fighters with the same care they gave their own casualties. I saw humans risking their lives to save alien children during evacuations." She moved to stand directly in front of Captain Voss. "The truth is complex, Captain. Both species committed terrible acts during the war. Both species also demonstrated remarkable capacity for compassion and honor. The peace will only last if it is built on acknowledging both realities. As they returned to their quarters, Marcus found himself deeply troubled. The mission he had thought was relatively straightforward was becoming increasingly complex. Protecting Zarathus from external threats was challenging enough, but now he had to consider the possibility that her testimony might threaten human interests. "You are concerned about what I will say at the tribunal," Zarathus observed as they walked through the corridors. "I'm concerned about a lot of things," Marcus replied, "including the fact that you seem to know exactly what effect your words will have on people. I do not manipulate emotions, Sergeant Chun. I simply understand them clearly enough to communicate effectively." They reached their quarters, and Marcus began his standard security check of the area. As he worked, Zarathus watched him with those unervingly perceptive eyes. "You fear that I will betray the humans who saved me," she said finally. Marcus paused in his equipment check. "Will you?" "I will testify truthfully about everything I witnessed. That is not betrayal. It is justice. True peace cannot be built on lies, even comfortable lies. And if the truth damages the peace process, then the peace process was not strong enough to survive anyway. Better to build something solid on truth than something fragile on deception." Marcus resumed his security check, but his mind was racing. The young alien's logic was compelling, but he could see dozens of ways her approach could backfire catastrophically. Political processes were rarely as straightforward as she seemed to believe. "There's something you're not considering," he said finally. "Politics isn't about truth, it's about perception. The right truth told at the wrong time can start a war just as easily as a lie." "Then, what would you have me do? Lie under oath to protect political convenience?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but I'm starting to understand why so many people want you dead." Zarathus settled onto her meditation cushion, her movements graceful despite her obvious exhaustion. "Do you want me dead, Sergeant Shun?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He studied her face, trying to read the alien expressions the way she read human emotions. "No," he said finally, "but I'm not sure I want you alive for the right reasons anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I started this mission wanting to protect you because it was my duty. Now I want to protect you because I think you might be the only person in this entire mess who actually cares more about doing the right thing than about winning." Zarathus smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, Marcus saw her look genuinely happy. "That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me since the war began." As the ship continued through hyperspace toward their next waypoint, Marcus established his watch position and tried to process everything that had happened. The confrontation with the Vethtai ships had been resolved without violence, but it had also raised new questions about the mission and its ultimate consequences. He was beginning to realize that keeping Zarathus alive might be the easy part of his assignment. The hard part would be living with the consequences of whatever truth she decided to tell once she reached Sanctum Prime. Outside the ship, hyperspace twisted around them in patterns that human eyes couldn't fully comprehend, carrying them toward a destination that promised answers to questions Marcus wasn't sure he wanted asked. In her quarters, Zarathus meditated on the complex emotions she had sensed during the day's events. Human feelings were so much more intense than those of her own species, layered with subtleties and contradictions that fascinated and sometimes frightened her. Most complex of all were the emotions of the human soldier assigned to protect her. Marcus Chun was honorable in a way that transcended species boundaries, but he was also struggling with conflicts that went to the heart of what it meant to choose between duty and conscience, between loyalty and justice. She hoped she would prove worthy of his protection. But more than that, she hoped she would prove worthy of his growing trust. The journey to Sanctum Prime was far from over, and she could sense that the greatest challenges lay ahead. The emergency beacon hit their sensors like a scream in the darkness. Marcus was instantly awake in his watch position, checking the security feeds as the Defiant dropped out of hyperspace in response to the distress signal. Through the observation ports, he could see the twisted wreckage of what had once been a passenger liner drifting against the backdrop of a dying red star. "All hands to emergency stations," Captain Voss announced over the intercom. "We have a civilian vessel in distress. Prepare for rescue operations." Marcus immediately moved to Zarathus's quarters, finding her already alert and standing by her door. Her markings were cycling through rapid color changes, and her expression was tense with concentration. "What do you sense?" he asked, unlocking her door. "Pain," she said simply. Many minds in terrible pain. But also, she paused, her head tilting as if listening to something beyond normal hearing. Deception. Someone is lying. About what? I cannot tell at this distance. But the distress is real, even if its cause is not what it appears to be. Marcus activated his comm unit. Captain Voss, this is Chun. My charge is sensing deception in connection with the distress call. Understood, Sergeant. We're proceeding with caution, but interstellar law requires us to respond to legitimate distress calls. Bring her to the bridge for consultation. The bridge was a hive of controlled activity when they arrived. The main screen showed a detailed scan of the damaged ship, which appeared to be a mixed-species passenger liner that had suffered massive hull breaches. Escape pods were scattered throughout the local space, their emergency transponders painting the tactical display with dozens of blinking lights. Report, Marcus said to Captain Voss. The ship is the RSV Harmony's Dream, a civilian liner carrying passengers from the former hegemony worlds to the neutral territories. According to the automated distress message, they suffered catastrophic engine failure and had to abandon ship. We're reading life signs in approximately 30 escape pods. Zarathes moved closer to the main display, studying the wreckage with intense focus. Her markings began pulsing in a rhythm that Marcus had learned indicated deep concentration. The distress is genuine, she said finally. I can sense the fear and desperation of the survivors. But there's something else. Someone aboard that ship was afraid before the accident occurred. Afraid of what? Captain Voss asked. Afraid of being discovered. Afraid of failure. Zarathes turned to face the captain. Captain, I believe someone sabotaged that ship. The tactical officer looked up from her console. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures consistent with plasma explosives in the engine compartment wreckage. Could it have been an accident? A reactor malfunction? Negative. The blast patterns are too precise. Someone knew exactly where to place charges for maximum damage. Marcus felt his combat instincts sharpening. Captain, this could be a trap. Sabotage the ship. Wait for a rescue vessel. Then what? Captain Voss asked. We have 30 pods full of genuine survivors. We can't just leave them to die. No, but we can be very careful about how we bring them aboard. Zarathes spoke up again. Captain, may I make a suggestion? Go ahead. Bring the survivors aboard in small groups. I can sense their emotional states as they board. If someone is planning violence or sabotage, I will be able to detect their intentions. Captain Voss considered this. You're willing to expose yourself to potential enemies? If the alternative is leaving innocent people to die in space, yes. Marcus didn't like the plan, but he couldn't argue with its logic. I'll need to adjust security protocols. If she's going to be scanning survivors, she'll be vulnerable during the process. Agreed. Mr. Torres, prepare Shuttle Bay 2 for survivor intake. Security teams to stations. Sergeant Shun, I want you and your charge in the observation deck overlooking the bay. She can scan the survivors from there while maintaining a safe distance. The next several hours were tense and exhausting. Groups of 5 survivors were brought aboard at regular intervals, each group thoroughly scanned for weapons or explosive devices before being allowed into the ship proper. Marcus watched the process through the observation deck windows while Zarathes stood beside him, her eyes closed in concentration as she read the emotions of each new arrival. Fear, gratitude, exhaustion, she murmured as the first group was processed. Relief to be alive. No deception. Second group, coming in, Marcus reported into his comm unit. Similar emotional patterns, Zarathes said. Wait, there's something different about the third individual. Not fear exactly. Nervousness? No, anticipation. Marcus activated his targeting laser, painting the third survivor with a discrete marking that the security team could see through their helmet displays. The individual was a human male, middle-aged, wearing the standard civilian evacuation suit. Continue monitoring, Marcus said. As the third group was brought aboard, Zarathes's markings suddenly flared bright red. Stop, she called into the comm system. The second individual in this group. Very intense emotions. Determination, hatred, and satisfaction. Marcus immediately activated the general alarm. Security alert. Detain the second individual in Group 3. Possible hostile. On the shuttle bay floor below, security personnel moved to surround the indicated survivor. The individual immediately reached for something concealed in their evacuation suit, but the security team was faster. Marcus watched as they stunned the person with a neural disruptor. Good call. Captain Voss's voice came through the comm. Medical is finding concealed weapons and what appears to be a compact explosive device. Species? Marcus asked. Human. Male, approximately 45 years old. No identification, but he's carrying forged documents identifying him as a passenger. Zarathes swayed slightly, and Marcus caught her arm to steady her. Are you all right? Using my abilities so intensely for extended periods is exhausting, she said. But yes, I am well. There is more, though. More what? More deception. Someone else among the survivors is not what they appear to be. The processing continued for another 2 hours, with Zarathes identifying 3 more individuals whose emotional states didn't match those of genuine disaster survivors. 2 were carrying concealed weapons, and the 3rd had detailed intelligence files about the Defiant's mission hidden in her clothing. Sergeant Chun, Captain Voss called over the intercom. Please bring your charge to my ready room. We need to debrief. In the captain's private office, Marcus and Zarathes sat across from Captain Voss while she reviewed the preliminary reports on the detained individuals. For infiltrators, the captain said, 3 human, 1 Vethtai, all carrying forged identity documents and concealed weapons or intelligence-gathering equipment. What was their mission? Marcus asked. According to the preliminary interrogations, they were supposed to blend in with legitimate refugees and then attempt to either capture or kill Zarathes during the confusion of processing survivors. Zarathes looked exhausted but determined. Captain, what will happen to the genuine survivors? We'll drop them off at the next neutral station. They'll be processed normally and allowed to continue to their destinations. And the infiltrators? They'll be turned over to the appropriate authorities for prosecution. Marcus leaned forward. Captain, this was clearly a coordinated operation. Someone knew our route and timing well enough to position a sabotage ship directly in our path. Agreed. Which means our mission has been compromised. We're changing course immediately and implementing full communications blackout. Where are we going? Directly to Sanctum Prime via an unmonitored route. No more stops, no more scheduled navigation beacons. We'll make the journey on backup life support if necessary. As they prepared to leave the captain's ready room, Zarathes spoke up. Captain, I need to tell you something important. Go ahead. One of the infiltrators, the Vethtai female, was carrying more than weapons. She had information about my family. What kind of information? My father is dead. He was executed by his own people 3 days ago for bringing shame to our species through his defeat by humanity. The room fell silent. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction that the architect of so much human suffering was dead, but also sympathy for Zarathes, who had just lost her father despite everything he had done. I'm sorry, Captain Voss said simply. Thank you. But there's more. My mother and younger siblings are being held hostage by the faction that killed my father. They will be executed if I testify at the tribunal. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because I hoped it was not true. Because I hoped that even my father's enemies would not harm innocent family members. She looked directly at Marcus. Because I hoped I would be strong enough to do what is right regardless of the personal cost. And now? Captain Voss asked gently. Now I must choose between justice and family. Between the greater good and the people I love most in the universe. Marcus studied her face, trying to read alien expressions that had become increasingly familiar over the past week. What will you choose? I do not know, she admitted. I had hoped to have more time to decide. But if my family is truly in danger, there might be another option, Captain Voss said. Once we reach Sanctum Prime, we can contact the Human Diplomatic Corps. They might be able to negotiate for your family's release. In exchange for what? Modified testimony. You tell the truth about what you witnessed, but you focus on events that won't destabilize the current political situation. Zarathes shook her head. That is not justice. That is political compromise disguised as justice. Sometimes political compromise is the only way to achieve real progress. Marcus said, surprised by his own words. Perfect justice that starts another war isn't justice at all. You have changed your mind about what I should do. Marcus realized she was right. Somewhere during their journey together, his perspective had shifted fundamentally. I've come to understand that the situation is more complex than I originally thought. I still believe in justice, but I also believe in protecting innocent people when possible, even if those innocent people are aliens? Even then, Zarathes was quiet for a long moment, her markings cycling through colors that Marcus was beginning to recognize as indicators of deep thought and emotional conflict. "Captain," she said finally, "how long until we reach Sanctum Prime?" 18 hours. Then, I have 18 hours to decide whether to choose justice or family. Whether to risk starting another war or risk failing the people who need my testimony to achieve peace. As they returned to their quarters, Marcus found himself hoping that some solution would present itself that would allow Zarathes to save both her family and the peace process. But his combat experience had taught him that rarely did situations resolve themselves so neatly. More likely, she would have to make an impossible choice and live with the consequences regardless of what she decided. The ship hummed through space toward Sanctum Prime, carrying them toward a destination that promised answers but guaranteed difficult decisions. In her quarters, Zarathes meditated on the complexity of competing loyalties and the price of moral certainty in an uncertain universe. Outside, the stars watched in silent judgment as the small human ship carried its precious and dangerous cargo toward whatever destiny awaited them all. Sanctum Prime hung in space before them like a metallic flower, its rotating sections catching light from the system's twin suns. The massive space station was humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement since the war's end, a neutral territory governed by representatives from dozens of species, where former enemies could meet under the protection of interstellar law. Marcus stood at the observation deck window beside Zarathes, watching the approach procedures as the Defiant requested docking clearance. After 8 days of travel, constant vigilance, and moral complexity that challenged everything he thought he understood about duty and justice, they were finally approaching their destination. "It's beautiful," Zarathes said, her voice carrying a note of wonder that reminded Marcus how young she truly was despite her wisdom and the weight of her responsibilities. "It's impressive," Marcus agreed, "but beauty and safety aren't the same thing." "No," she replied, her markings pulsing gently as she sensed his emotional state. "You are still concerned about what will happen when we arrive." Marcus activated his comm unit. "Captain Voss, what's the security situation?" "Complex," came the immediate reply. "We have confirmation that tribunal representatives from 17 different species are already aboard the station. That includes humans, Vethtai, and a dozen species from the former Hegemony Coalition. Any threats?" "Nothing specific, but intelligence suggests there are still factions on all sides that would prefer Zarathes never testifies. The station's security forces are supposed to be neutral, but in practice, that just means everyone distrusts them equally." Zarathes moved closer to the window as they approached the docking ring. "Sergeant Shun, may I ask you something?" "Of course. When this is over, what will you do? Will you return to Earth?" The question caught Marcus off guard. Over the past week, he had been so focused on the immediate mission that he hadn't given much thought to what would come after. "I haven't really thought about it." "Why?" "Because I can sense that this mission has changed you. You are not the same person who agreed to protect me 8 days ago." Marcus considered this. She was right, of course. The black and white certainty he had brought to this assignment had been replaced by something more complex and nuanced. "How have I changed?" "You have learned that enemies can become allies, that duty can conflict with conscience, and that justice is more complicated than punishment." She paused, studying his reflection in the window. "You have learned that protecting someone does not require agreeing with them, but it does require understanding them. And what have you learned?" Zarathes was quiet for several moments, her alien features reflecting the station's lights. "I have learned that humans are capable of extraordinary moral courage, even when it costs them personally. I have learned that your species' supposed unpredictability is actually a form of adaptability that allows you to grow beyond your initial beliefs and prejudices." The docking procedure took another hour, with multiple security checks and diplomatic protocols that reflected the station's complex political situation. When they finally received clearance to disembark, Marcus was surprised to see a full diplomatic escort waiting for them. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell was a career diplomat who had negotiated several key provisions of the peace treaty. She was flanked by security personnel from 3 different species, all wearing the neutral gray uniforms of Sanctum Prime's peacekeeping force. "Zarathes," Ambassador Mitchell said, offering the traditional Vethtai greeting gesture. "Welcome to Sanctum Prime." I hope your journey was safe. It was eventful, Zarathes replied diplomatically. Ambassador Mitchell, this is Sergeant Marcus Chun, who has protected me during the journey. Sergeant, your reputation precedes you. Admiral Rodriguez speaks very highly of your service. Marcus nodded politely while scanning the area for potential threats. The docking bay was large enough to accommodate ships from dozens of different species, and he could see representatives from several former hegemony races moving through the area on various diplomatic missions. What's the security situation here? He asked. Officially excellent. Sanctum Prime has the most advanced security systems in known space, and all weapons except those carried by approved security personnel are prohibited. Ambassador Mitchell paused. Unofficially, tensions are running high. Several delegations have already lodged formal protests about Zarathes's testimony, and there have been demonstrations both supporting and opposing the tribunal. As they moved through the station's corridors toward the diplomatic quarters, Marcus was struck by the complexity of the environment. The architecture itself was a compromise between dozens of different species' aesthetic and functional requirements, creating spaces that felt both magnificent and slightly alien to human sensibilities. More importantly, the emotional atmosphere was thick with tension. Marcus didn't need Zarathes's abilities to sense the underlying hostility between various groups. Former enemies were attempting to coexist peacefully, but the wounds of war were still fresh. Ambassador, Zarathes said as they walked, I need to discuss something with you privately. Of course. We can talk as soon as you're settled. Their destination was a suite of rooms designed to accommodate Vethtai physiology while maintaining human security standards. Marcus conducted a thorough security sweep while Ambassador Mitchell and Zarathes spoke in the main room. The information about your family is accurate, he heard the ambassador saying. They are being held by a faction calling itself the Restoration Movement, led by some of your father's former officers. What are their demands? That you either refuse to testify entirely, or that you testify only about human war crimes while remaining silent about Vethtai actions. And if I refuse, they claim your family will be executed as traitors to the Vethtai people. Marcus finished his security check and joined the conversation. What options do we have for extracting her family? Limited, Ambassador Mitchell admitted. The Restoration Movement is operating from a heavily fortified base in a system that's technically outside our jurisdiction. Any rescue attempt would require military action that could be interpreted as an act of war. So, I must choose, Zarathes said quietly. Family or justice? Actually, Ambassador Mitchell said, there may be a third option. Both Marcus and Zarathes looked at her expectantly. The tribunal has agreed to consider closed-session testimony for sensitive matters. You could testify about the most damaging events in private, with only the judges and a limited number of observers present. The public record would show that you testified truthfully, but the specific details wouldn't be immediately released. That's political theater, Marcus objected. If the goal is justice and truth, hiding the evidence defeats the purpose. But it might buy time, Zarathes said thoughtfully. Time for negotiation, time for the political situation to stabilize, time for my family to be rescued through diplomatic rather than military means. It's a compromise, Ambassador Mitchell agreed. Not perfect justice, but perhaps pragmatic progress toward eventual justice. Zarathes moved to the window that looked out over the station's central plaza. Below, Marcus could see groups of beings from dozens of species moving through the area, some in obvious disagreement, but all operating under the protocols of civilized discourse rather than violence. How long do I have to decide? Zarathes asked. The tribunal begins tomorrow. You're scheduled to testify in 3 days. Then, I have 3 days to determine whether I am brave enough to trust in imperfect justice or foolish enough to believe in perfect justice at the cost of my family's lives. That evening, as Marcus established a security routine in the new environment, he found himself thinking about the conversation. Over the past week, he had watched Zarathes grapple with questions that had no clear answers, decisions that would affect not just her own future, but potentially the future of interstellar relations. Sergeant Chun, her voice came through the intercom system. Yes. May I ask your advice? Marcus paused in his equipment check. Over the course of their journey, their relationship had evolved from simple guard and prisoner to something approaching mutual respect. But she had never asked for his advice on the fundamental questions facing her. I'm not sure I'm qualified to advise you on something this important. You are more qualified than you realize. You have demonstrated that humans are capable of making difficult moral choices even when they conflict with personal desires. I need to understand how you do that. Marcus thought about this. I don't know if I do it well, but I think the key is remembering that the choices we make define who we are, not just what we achieve. Can you explain what you mean? If you compromise your principles to save your family, you might succeed in keeping them alive, but you would have to live knowing that you abandoned your beliefs when they were tested. If you maintain your principles, but lose your family, you would have to live with that loss, but you would also know that you stayed true to what you believe is right. So you think I should testify truthfully regardless of the consequences? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I think you should do whatever allows you to live with yourself afterward. But I also think you should remember that your family would probably want you to choose honor over their safety if they knew the full situation. You believe that? I believe that people who raise someone like you would understand the importance of doing what's right, even when it's painful. The next day brought a steady stream of diplomatic meetings, security briefings, and procedural discussions as the tribunal prepared to begin. Marcus attended each session, watching for threats, but also observing the complex political dynamics at play. Representatives from the former hegemony species were clearly divided between those who wanted to move forward with the peace process and those who saw the tribunal as an opportunity to relitigate the war's outcome. Human representatives were similarly split between those who wanted full accountability for all war crimes and those who prefer to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on past atrocities. Through it all, Zarathes maintained her composure and dignity, answering questions honestly while revealing nothing about her internal struggle over how much truth to tell. On the second day, Ambassador Mitchell brought news that changed everything. "We've located your family," she told Zarathes during a private briefing. "Intelligence assets have confirmed their location and condition. Are they safe? For now. But our sources suggest the restoration movement is planning to execute them publicly if you begin testimony tomorrow." Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. "Then, we extract them tonight. It's not that simple. Any rescue attempt would require violating the sovereignty of a neutral system. The political ramifications could undermine the entire peace process. So we let them die to protect political convenience?" Marcus asked. "We consider all our options carefully," Ambassador Mitchell replied, "including the possibility that the threat itself is a bluff designed to prevent Zarathes from testifying." Zarathes had been silent throughout the exchange, her markings cycling through complex patterns that Marcus had learned indicated intense concentration. "They are not bluffing," she said finally. "I can sense the emotional resonance of truth even across interstellar distances when the emotions are intense enough. They fully intend to carry out their threat." "Then what do we do?" Marcus asked. "We do what we came here to do," Zarathes replied, her voice carrying a strength that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her apparent age. "We trust that justice and truth are more important than individual safety, even when that individual is someone we love. You're going to testify truthfully, knowing it will cost your family's lives?" "I'm going to testify truthfully because it is right and because my family would expect nothing less from me. They raised me to value honor above safety, truth above convenience, and justice above personal desires." Marcus stared at her, feeling a complex mix of admiration and horror. "Are you sure?" "No," she said simply. "But being unsure does not change what is right." That night, Marcus stood watch outside Zarathes's quarters while she meditated in preparation for the next day's testimony. Through the intercom, he could hear her practicing her statement, reviewing the events she had witnessed, and preparing herself emotionally for what was to come. At dawn, she emerged ready to face the tribunal. Her markings were glowing with a steady, determined light, and her expression carried the calm certainty of someone who had made peace with a difficult decision. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked. "I am ready to do what I came here to do," she replied. "I am ready to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences." The tribunal chamber was vast, designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of species while maintaining the formal dignity appropriate to interstellar justice. As Zarathes took her place at the witness stand, Marcus positioned himself where he could watch both her and the assembled delegates for any signs of threat or disruption. When the chief judge asked her to state her name and qualifications for the record, Zarathes's voice carried clearly throughout the chamber. I am Zarathus of the Vethtai, daughter of High Commander Veltar, and I am here to tell you the truth about what I witnessed during the war between the Hegemony Coalition and humanity." As she began her testimony, Marcus realized that he was witnessing something extraordinary, a young being choosing justice over personal safety, truth over political convenience, and honor over the lives of those she loved most. It was, he thought, the most human thing he had ever seen an alien do. And in that moment, Marcus understood that the real victory of the war had not been humanity's military triumph over the Hegemony Coalition. The real victory was this: the recognition that courage, honor, and moral integrity transcended species boundaries, and that the best hopes for lasting peace lay not in the dominance of one people over another, but in a shared commitment to justice that beings like Zarathus represented. The truth she told that day would indeed have consequences. Some of them would be tragic, some would be redemptive, and all of them would be necessary for the difficult work of building a just peace in a complex galaxy. But that is a story for another time.